Hi, everyone that's starting to join us. We'll get started here in a few minutes. We appreciate you being here tonight. Mr. Bingham, how are you, sir?
I'm fine, thank you. And you?
I'm doing well. Thank you again for being here tonight.
Not a problem. Glad to help if I could.
Well, we appreciate it. We'll get started here in a few minutes. I'm going to do an introduction and we'll do some important announcement dates coming up and then introduce you, and then I'll turn the floor over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you. How are y'all?
We're doing great. Yourself?
Doing well. Just busy with that work hustle, school hustle, and making time for this.
Excellent. So you are a student at Fort Lewis?
Yes, sir.
Great. What's your first name?
Taylor Altman.
Taylor.
Oh, I see. I must be signed in from a different account. Usually that just pops up right there.
No, I see your name, but it's abbreviated. I didn't see your first name. So.
Well, hello. Yep. I happen to be last year's Hawk Tank winner. So
I was going to say, I think I remember Dr. Valdez introducing you in one session that you were that winner. So congratulations. Glad you're here tonight.
Well, thank you. Yeah, he that was quite on the spot in front of a lot of powerful people. Like, thank you, Dr. Valdez.
You did well.
I appreciate it.
You're most welcome. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank
Are
you.
you competing again this year?
Yes, sir.
Good. So remind me again what your major is. When do you plan to graduate? Where are you going to go to graduate school? Where are you going to get your PhD?
Oh gosh. But I am entrepreneurship and small business under Dr. Valdez. Have had, gosh, 4 classes with him now. I will be graduating spring of 22. Decided to extend my stay an extra semester so I could get a minor in digital marketing. And from there, who knows? The world is my oyster. Taking a little bit of a break after school before returning back to school will be necessary, but certainly open to the idea of going on and furthering my education.
Well, I would encourage that. As you can tell, I used to be a teacher as well, but I would start researching those graduate schools now so you can have an idea and a plan and start working towards that goal.
Yes, sir. Great advice.
Thank you. Dr. Valdez, how are you tonight, sir?
Everyone,
Good, good. Introduce you real quick, Dr. Valdez. This is Mr. Bingham. Mr. Bingham, this is Dr. Michael Valdez from Fort Lewis College, who the Hawk Tank series was actually started there by Dr. Valdez in the School of Business with Dean Elias. So this is the first year that San Juan will be participating in this competition. So we're very happy to have their mentorship and support and in this wonderful union that we're creating for our students and our community. So thank you.
I took the time this afternoon to look at the video that's online, about 13 minutes long, which talked a little bit about the history of the program, the sponsors, and last year's high school and collegiate winners. So
that's great, Mr. Bingham.
very interesting concepts that they had come up with.
Yeah, we really appreciate your time, and this is a really big part of this growth is sort of bringing the expertise from the Farmington area. We know that you spent a lot of time at Purgatory, and you're one of us. But we really I'm just so thankful, and I know we're recording tonight because a lot of students have already emailed me that they want to watch this video, and I followed up with Dean Rawlinson to make sure we get it. So thank you, sir, and we really just appreciate all your time.
Okay, I'm glad to help out.
Great.
Well, we'll wait a couple more minutes, everyone, and we'll get started. I want to thank everybody as you're joining on here tonight for this third workshop in our series with the Hawk Tank competition. And we'll have I'm going to give a couple of reminder dates and critical dates that are coming up, and then I'll introduce our guest speaker tonight, Mr. Seth Bingham, an attorney, and we'll let him have the floor, and he'll give his presentation, and then if you will hold your questions until he's done, then we'll do a Q&A. You can either put your questions in the chat box or raise your hand, and we'll try to answer as many questions as possible for the time allowable. Just a kind of a courtesy note and to help our bandwidth, if you're not speaking, please be sure that your mics are on mute. We're more than happy for you to all show your shining faces. We all love to see who's participating and get to know you that way. And we encourage you again to ask questions, because that's what this is for. It's to provide you input as you're putting your plans together to submit for this competition. And Dr. Valdez, we will get you this recording as soon as we're done this evening. Media Services will probably get it to you tomorrow.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
You want that to
Thank
come
you.
directly to you, or?
Yeah, to me, it's great, Dean Rawlinson. Then what I'll do is I'll send it to our IT people to put it on the Hawk Tank website. And
Right.
then what I'll do also is I'll include it in the next invitation. And so
Okay,
that's how
great.
we sort of make sure that we get those hit rates that we normally hit. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Absolutely. Thank you, sir. Well, it's 5:05, and out of respect to everybody's time, we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to welcome you all tonight. I am Eddie Rawlinson, the Dean of the School of Business, Information Technology, and Social Sciences at San Juan College. And we're partnering with Fort Lewis College. And I want to thank all students from San Juan College and Fort Lewis College who are taking part tonight. San Juan College, this is actually our first time to take part in this competition, and we're very pleased that Fort Lewis College has been gracious enough to invite us. I do want to thank our Board of Trustees at San Juan College and our President, Dr. Tony Pendergrass, and all of our leadership, faculty, and staff, and more importantly, our students that support this important program. We're very, very grateful to be part of this, and I want to next address a couple of important dates. This is our third workshop, and next week on the 18th, we'll be having workshop 4, and that will be market analysis and revenue forecasting. That will be a very important work session, as well as this one, to prepare you for your proposals. Then the real critical date is going to be the following week of February 22nd, which will be the date that you need to submit your team participation registration. So don't forget that date, February 26th. That's a critical date. So if you're still putting your teams together, try to at least put as much as your team members together, and or put the pressure on them that you need your commitment. And there'll still be time to work on your proposal to submit. That's not until March, but we need to know who's going to be participating for planning with other workshops and other activities that we have for all of you taking part. And again, I saw a little chat a minute ago. We understand there may be technical issues you're having. So don't worry about that. Just stay on or connect back on as soon as you do. If you know folks in your team members, maybe they're going to be joining late, that'll be fine. We're going to have our presentation by Mr. Bingham here in just a minute, and then he's going to allow time for Q&A. So I, again, encourage you to engage Mr. Bingham with his expertise. So Mr. Seth Bingham is our guest speaker tonight. And again, I want to thank you, sir, for taking part in this important workshop for our students. He is an attorney, shareholder director at Miller Stratford, PA, here in Albuquerque and here in Farmington. He received his BS with a distinction from the University of Colorado at Denver. And then he received his JD cum laude from Crichton University in Omaha, Nebraska, which basically is his law degree and gives him those credentials to begin to not only take the bar exams that you're required to do, but gives him the credentials to practice law and or teach, depending on what he chooses to do. Some highlights were that he was a law clerk with the Honorable Santiago Campos, U.S. District Court Judge in Santa Fe, New Mexico. He is currently, again, as I said, an attorney and shareholder and director at Miller Stratford. And the other item that I thought was very important to show you this range and scope of experience and expertise he'll be visiting with you tonight. He was also a U.S. magistrate judge in Farmington. And for all kind of transparency, he currently serves and has been serving as counsel for San Juan College here in Farmington. He is licensed in New Mexico and Colorado, a member of the American New Mexico, Colorado, Southwest Colorado, and San Juan County Bar Association. He has been a former and current board member of the River Reach Foundation and Boys and Girls Clubs of Farmington, as well as a longtime volunteer for the Boy Scouts of America. And then the one that I really enjoyed, Mr. Bingham, was your last item on the resume you sent me. Since 1999 to currently, he is a ski instructor at Purgatory, one of my favorite places to ski, and actually where I learned to ski. So that just shows you, again, he's a professional and an expert in his field. But as with all of us, we have different interests outside our field of study. So again, Mr. Bingham, I can't thank you enough for being here tonight and sharing with these wonderful students and these team members. So with that, Dr. Valdez, do you have anything to say before we turn the floor over?
No, absolutely not. Thank you. That was a great introduction. I am just absolutely wowed. I'm probably going to have to step off a little early tonight. And normally I stay on all night, but you're in excellent hands. And of course, y'all know, and those dates are really critical. I'll email you all reminders. And good luck to you, everyone. And thank you, Mr. Bingham, so much
You're welcome.
for everything you're doing for us.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Valdez. So, Mr. Bingham, you have the floor, sir.
Okay, I appreciate the opportunity of being able to help with this project. You know, I have lots of individuals and potential entrepreneurs who come to my office and want to start businesses. And so this is really what you're doing in terms of preparing your business plan is not unlike what clients do that come and see me. And some of the things that we're going to talk about tonight are things that I would talk with them about relative to considerations that they need to think about relative to how they are going to launch this idea, how they're going to go forward with their business. And you know, they come in excited, and they thought about the first 2 or 3 things that they want to do, but sometimes they don't get to item number 10 on the list, or item number 20 on the list, or item number 30 on the list, which is interesting because in much of what you do as starting a business is that you are looking not at the immediate horizon, but you're also looking at things down the road and where you want to go. And so I guess my first question that I would ask all of you as you put your business plans together is, and the concept that you're thinking and the business that you want to create is, what is your motivation? What are you trying to do? Are you trying to provide a source of income for yourself? Are you wanting to take an idea and be able to own it and live with it and do something with it on a personal level? Do you want to share that with others? Do you want to be able to sell that concept and bring other people in? You know, some people are happy on the small scale, and your business can be successful on the small scale. Some people think on a medium scale, and some people think big. And depending on what your motivation is, what you want or what your goal for this may determine some of the steps that you want to consider in putting your business plan together. If you're thinking you want to keep this simple, you want to keep this contained and manageable, that will send you a certain way. If you think that you want to grow this thing and want to be able to attract investors and be able to take it on to a regional or a national platform, that will take you a different direction in terms of what you need to think about relative to your business plan. So one of the things out of the box that I think that you need to consider is in going forward is risk awareness and risk aversion. And when you say, what do you mean by risk awareness and risk aversion? Every day businesses fail. And the number of businesses that succeed is a very small percentage of businesses that get started. And so when a business fails, that has consequences. And so one of the things is do you want to be personally liable for all of those business contracts, for those debts that are owed, and that will end up affecting some of the choices that you make relative to this. And here's just I want to share this with you. And let me tell you that I am an analog man in a digital world. But I'm going to try to share this on the screen and see if it comes up. If you'll tell me what this comes up. Does that come up with everybody? Let me see if I can pull it up here. Can everybody see that?
Not yet.
Okay, let me click on that. Now, did anybody see that?
There it is. Yes, sir.
Okay, here is something that's about a year old, but here is something to at least consider and risk aversion. And one of the considerations that you have to make is, here's just a little thing on Jeff Bezos's $50 billion divorce. And you say, well, what does that have to do with what we're going to do in terms of creating my business and my business plan? And the reason I put that up there is because, you have to consider the negative things that will happen and prepare for that from the outset. It will help life be a whole lot easier when you address all those things along the way, as opposed to saying, well, those things I'll worry about it someday, and I'm never going to have to consider it because, hey, my partners or the people I'm working with, we all get along and things will be great. And my wife likes me, or my girlfriend likes me, and things are going to be fine. Well, that's what Jeff Bezos thought. And now the ultimate is this $38 billion stake that his former wife took in Amazon as a result of the divorce. And so those are just some things to think about, risks that are out there and how you're going to manage those, and how you're going to choose in the initial phase of how we're going to structure this business, what we're going to do there. And so I think that's a consideration that you have to make. One of the people, I hate to hold this out as an example because I'm personally offended with the whole thing, but not that one. What would happen if Melania and Donald Trump got a divorce? Well, the issue is he has a prenuptial agreement. He planned ahead for that ultimate day, which may be coming. But there was a plan there. The purpose of that is to be able to establish that you thought about some things at the beginning, as opposed to putting them off and never raising them up onto the table. So I want to come back to the idea, and let me see if I can come back out of the screen sharing mode for a minute here. And here we go. And that is the concept that we want that protection. And so the protection that we offer entrepreneurs in the creation of a business is called the corporate veil. Okay. And you know what the veil is, a wedding veil that you pull down over your head, or a veil that's pulled across as a curtain. It's a shield. It's designed to protect you. And some types of business entities have that corporate veil and others don't. And so part of picking what you want to do is that risk aversion, risk awareness, and risk aversion. One of the things that you're all familiar with is corporations, and corporations have shareholders. They have officers, a president, a vice president, a secretary, a treasurer, usually. They have a board of directors. Those are common elements that you see in a corporation. That takes a lot more to manage that. Your business may be on that smaller scale, that more manageable scale. That gives you more than what you need. And you may decide that what I want to be is the option of a limited liability company, an LLC, which is much more simple to operate, much more simple to form. You don't need officers. The members of the LLC, rather than a shareholder, which a corporation has, an LLC has members. And the members can have different percentages of interest based on their contributions into the business. They can all be equal stakeholders in the business, or they can put in different amounts, and that would be reflected in their membership interest. Then you can have, rather than have officers and directors, you just have a manager. Or managers. You can have all the members be managers if you want. The flexibility of LLCs is actually one of the great things about them. Another great thing is corporations have annual reports that have to be made and filed to the state Secretary of State or the Corporation Commission, but LLCs have none of that. It's simple. You get it created and it exists, and you don't have to pay an annual fee like you do with a corporation to keep it in good standing with the state. So LLCs have become really the primary method for creating most of the businesses I do today in terms of creating are LLCs, simply because they're simple to create, they're simple to operate, They have lots of flexibility, and that's one of the considerations that you're looking for. And most states, New Mexico certainly does this. You can convert a corporation to an LLC, and you can convert an LLC to corporation if you find that over time what you want is to grow and you want to have more structure. There's some options that are allowed there. So the other things that you may be familiar with that the corporate veil does not exist in is, number one, a sole proprietorship, where you just start doing business. I'm a business of one, and I'm all that there is. I have no separate entity. I may create a business account at the bank, and I might try to keep my business monetary things on one ledger and my personal things on another, but it's a sole proprietorship. Well, that's great. It's very simple, but if you have liability, you're personally liable for what happens. So if the business goes south and goes into the tank, they will be looking at you personally to help satisfy the debts of your business. Whereas an LLC and a corporation, the business entity is liable. The members and the shareholders are not liable. And that's every business in that risk aversion, thinking down the road of what I want to be exposed to. I don't think anybody wants to expose their house, their car, their income stream from their day job, all those things to a claim arising out of a failed business attempt. So you have sole proprietorships. Other things that you're familiar with that also do not have the corporate veil are a general partnership, where you and your partners, Larry, Curly, and Mo, all get together. Well, when Three Stooges Trucking goes south, or you're in an accident and you don't have insurance, they will come and look at the general partners all together. Your liability in a partnership is you are jointly and severally liable. They can come after one of you. Whoever has the deep pocket, they're going to come after, or they'll come after everybody. They sue everybody. And so general partnerships and partnerships don't have the corporate veil. That is something that may work from a concept, but you have to knowingly go into that with the idea of, okay, I'm willing to accept that risk for the partnership to operate. A variation on that is a limited partnership. Now, limited partnership is you have general partners, and then you would have a limited partner who put in money. And let me take a step back. A general partner has equal right to say how the business is operated. They have a fiduciary duty to the business. They have a say in what goes on, an equal say relative to what goes on, and equal liability. If there is a limited partner that's joined with you in that, somebody that has put money in and their stake is as a limited partner, and that's what you call them, is that they share in the profits of the business, but they don't share in the administration or decision making, and they don't share in the liability. That's one benefit of a limited partnership, is a limited partner isn't liable. You've had them invest, you got their money, but you've kind of kept them at bay, and they get to share the money, but they don't share the liability. So those are the general formats of common business entities. And in most states now, they've all adopted Uniform Corporation Act, Uniform Limited Liability Company Act, Uniform Partnership Act. So states are generally similar now in what they do in terms of entities, and very similar. I would show you something for New Mexico, just particular. And Colorado may have the same thing, but I work with this on a daily basis. Let me pull up share this picture with you and go back to sharing the screen. if you go to, let's see, okay, I think we're up. In New Mexico, the businesses are created through the New Mexico Secretary of State. And you can actually go online. If you look down here in this left-hand column, you can, it gets you started in a business. There's a domestic New Mexico limited liability company, a domestic New Mexico for-profit corporation. And if you click on those things, if we click on the LLC here, it goes and tells us a little bit about what you're going to do. You're going to e-file the documentation for forming the company. You're going to file articles of organization. And if the name is available, you go on the Secretary of State's website to determine whether the name you want to name your business, Larry Curly Moe Trucking, or Three Stooges Trucking, you see if it's available. And if it's available, they'll let you organize. If you want to reserve that name because you think it's a great idea and you want to preserve the name, but it's going to be a while before you get the entity created, you can reserve the name in New Mexico to preserve that name if you want it. And so you can create the domestic limited liability company online. You can do all the things that you need to do to file an articles of organization. You file the registered agent, an acceptance of registered agent. Everybody wants, I talked about liability, a risk aversion. Everybody wants to know who's in control. And so everybody has a registered agent who is authorized to accept service on behalf of the business. And so that's, whether you're a corporation or you're an LLC, you'll have to have a registered agent to be able to accept service of process when you get sued. And so I hate to tell you that for most businesses, it's not a question of if you ever get sued. It's a question of when you're going to get sued. At some point in time, it will happen. Somebody will be unhappy and a claim will be made. And so you just have to be able to think about that as part of what you do. So we've talked a little bit about what's my motivation. Do I want to keep something small and manageable? Do I think it's going to grow? Do I think I'm going to have lots of people who want to invest? You know, that may decide whether I want to have an LLC with members, whether I want to have a corporation with shareholders, because we're going to go out and market and sell stock that people can buy an interest and a stake in my business. That helps you, that motivation helps you be able to kind of pick which track you want to follow. You know, you kind of also think a little bit about where I'm headed, where I think this is going to go in terms of my idea, in terms of growth potential. Is it going to grow to beyond my community? Is it going to grow to state or regional or potentially national? That may affect actually where I file all my and create my business. Most large corporations, interestingly, in the United States, are created in the state of Delaware. It's interesting that is the place that is chosen, but they have favorable laws for the creation of business, and large national corporations choose to organize under the laws of Delaware. For your scale, you may not need to do that, and you may simply say, I'm going to file and create my business in Colorado, or I'm going to create my business in New Mexico, and that's just fine. So we've created this business. You filed the structure, you filed the articles of organization for an LLC, or you filed your articles of incorporation for your corporation, or you've even formed a partnership. Okay. Well, you have a business structure that's created with that, but you have no detail. And one of the things that is required for a successful business is that you create the map of what you're going to do in your business from the outset. And for corporations, that roadmap, all the sinews, all the muscles and the nerves that you're going to place on the bony skeleton of the corporation is the bylaws. It's going to control the daily operations of how we're going to do things, how many people have to constitute a quorum, how many people have to vote, what people do for their jobs, what officers do, what members, what the directors have to do. And so the bylaws is an absolute critical thing. It's interesting however, how many businesses get created, they file their articles of incorporation, and then they never create bylaws. So you don't know how to deal with problems or how things are going to operate because nobody took the time to create this governing document that says this is how we're going to do things for us in Three Stooges Trucking Incorporated. And so one of the things you plan on is just like Mr. Bezos, is what happens in that document is selling your stock. In a closely held corporation, you want to be able to sell the stock to other members of the corporation rather than to a third party stranger. You want to be in business with the people that you want to be in business with, not strangers. That comes into the bylaws as to how that's done. What happens when somebody dies? What happens when somebody gets divorced? Those things are all dealt with within the body of this governing document, the bylaws. The corollary of that for an LLC is the operating agreement. And if you sat down and kind of put them side by side, they really look very similar in terms of the topics that are covered. They talk about, what members are, what the managers are, what managers can do, how you raise money, capital contributions, what happens for meetings, what happens when somebody dies, how do you sell your membership, what happens when the business the members decide to terminate and wind up the business. Those things are all covered in the operating agreement. For a partnership, you can have a partnership agreement, which does the same thing. It gives the direction of how things are going to be done on a daily basis for the business. And they're critical documents. And I can't stress enough in my experience how many people with good intentions never get to the stage of bylaws, an operating agreement, or a partnership agreement. And then there's a problem. And then it's at that point in time, the wheels come off. There's a fight. They can't agree on anything. And the business, which is operating great and has lots of potential, at that point in time fails because of the internal disputes, because they never addressed the problems from the outset. They never gave themselves a formula and a format for doing things. And so you just have to think about that as you create your business. That we need this. It's a critical part of what we do for a business. One of the other critical decisions up front that we talk about, besides the nature or the type of entity that we're going to pick for our business, is taxing. We have to pay income taxes, and corporations pay corporate taxes. One of the benefits of partners is the partners, their individual shares can be individually taxed. So the business itself doesn't take on the tax obligation. The tax obligation remains with the partners. Well, one of the things historically you just need to be aware of is historically the taxation rate on individuals is a lot lower than it is on corporations. We favor the small guy to the detriment of the large corporation. I'd much rather have General Motors paying a 35% rate on their taxes than me, as a small individual paying 35%. And so that is a decision that you have to consider in creating your business, is how do we want to get this taxed? One of the great benefits of a limited liability company is you get to choose. You can choose to be taxed as a C Corp, on the corporate basis, or as an S Corp, where the tax liability is passed through to the individual members of the business who pay at a lower rate. Now, one of the things that came out with the Trump tax cuts that were done 3 years ago is that we didn't know how that shook out because the corporate rates dropped so significantly that we were telling people, you need to go back and talk to the accountants and figure out which is the best deal for you, whether you want to stay on an S rate, whether you want to stay on a corporate rate, whether you want to make a change. And so I would, not promoting the legal profession per se, but one of the things in creating a business plan that you ought to consider is including the time and money to go meet with your lawyer who's going to help you and talk about all these things, and to meet with your accountant to look at the tax consequences and those obligations and get sound advice as to what you want to do, because you want to make those considerations and knowledgeable choices at the beginning, rather than go along blindly and then suddenly be caught in a tax situation that was disadvantageous to you. Remember, risk aversion is a constant thought for an entrepreneur, is risk aversion. Where we're at, and then we've talked a little bit about the money for the CPA and the lawyer and where you want to go and your motivation on all of this. Let's talk a little bit about your name. And you've got a great name. Whether it's Three Stooges Trucking, you think it's catchy, you think it's one that will be easily recognized, but you have to consider, is that name protectable? Can that name be protected from others? Is it unique to you? Can you register and use it in Colorado and New Mexico, but I can't use it nationwide? So one of the things that happens is names often get registered as a service mark, and they can be registered on a state level or a federal level. And so the logo that you have for your business can be copyrighted. The color scheme can be protected, but you have to kind of consider where you want to take that. And that may limit, if you think you're going to go big, you may have to have a unique name that is not present in other states, and you've come up with something that's totally unique to you. And you may have to do some investigation on whether that name is available. So for simple businesses, for that manageable LLC that you're only going to do in Colorado or only going to do in New Mexico, your name, Three Stooges Trucking, may work just fine. But if you're going to go big, you might find, oh, there's a Three Stooges Trucking in Texas, and one in Oklahoma, and one in Wyoming, and all of a sudden you've now, remember that risk aversion. Now you've got a confusing issue where their customers are calling you up, or there's a legal dispute involving Three Stooges Trucking, but it's the Texas Three Stooges Trucking. But they're dunning you and sending you bills and suing you, and so this isn't merely an exercise in possibilities. It is something that happens all the time when businesses get confused and have common names, and their name isn't protected beyond the state that they operate in. So that's certainly a consideration. I would just give you one other thought before I kind of move on relative to operating agreements, partnership agreements, and bylaws. And that is one of the unique things that all those documents should do is deal with the buyout. How you're going to buy another member's interest, how you're going to buy another shareholder's stock, how you're going to buy out a partner, how you're going to pay for that and not bankrupt the company. And so sometimes that can be done with insurance policies. When somebody dies, you designate who the beneficiary is. It can be done How you're going to value that, you may have, and the benefit of having that in your agreement is that there's no fight or dispute later on when that unhappy event happens. The death of somebody, the divorce of somebody, or the somebody who really wants out, or somebody who has failed in your business to carry out a fiduciary duty that they owe to you, a member that owes to you, or an officer who's also a shareholder owes to the corporation, and you want to get rid of them. But then you have to figure out how you're going to buy him out without bankrupting the company or forcing the company to liquidate its assets. And so that's often done. We're going to the evaluation through a evaluation on the paper assets, the assets that are on the books of the company is done. You could bring in an outside accountant or a business evaluator to come up with a number. There's lots of different things, but the beauty of that is you take the fight away if you've already said, when these things happen, when item 1, 2, or 3 happen, this is how we're going to value it. This is how it's going to be paid. This is how we're going to pay it off over time. And so you want to consider those things as part of where you're going to go and plan for the unhappy day from the beginning rather than merely kick that can down the road. We talked about that. Let's talk a little bit about the idea and complexity. You decide that you think your business is going to grow and that you want to sell stock. You decide to go that route. Well, you are inviting people to invest in your business by way of buying stock. Stock is considered by the federal government to be a security. There is all sorts of federal law, the Federal Securities Act, that comes into play when you sell stock. You have to have prospectuses. You have to tell people about your business. That may be more complex than what you want to do. You may want to keep it closely held merely to the original investors who are the investors and get stock for their original stake in the company. So a company that's held together by its original investors and you don't want to sell it beyond that is called a closely held corporation. If you're going to sell stock, it is a different entity. It is a full-blown operating corporation subject to the Federal Securities Act, and you'll end up having to have a securities lawyer help you with all of that. So it's just kind of one of those things. If you think you're going to be selling stakes in your business, it opens up a whole other realm of regulation and risk that is out there for your business. We've talked a little bit about registering names, service marks, trademarks to protect that Three Stooges trucking for you and Curly and Mo when you create your business. One of the things that you need to consider, and this is part of risk aversion, and as a lawyer, that's what we do. We look for problems and try to solve them in advance, is consider this idea of qualifications, industry standards, those sorts of things. I'm going to create something, I'm going to do something, but are there industry standards that are required for that? You know, we live in oil and gas country. And so one of the things that we have equipment that's manufactured to be able to process components of oil and gas. Because of the risk associated with hydrocarbons and explosions, that risk is minimized if you build your product according to recognized standards. And so an example would be the American Petroleum Institute creates industry standards that apply to welding and creating equipment. And so if you're going to do your business and you're going to create something that there is an industry standard, you need to know what that standard is, because I can guarantee you if your product fails and you don't abide by an industry standard or follow an industry standard, that claim is going to come back to you. And if you're a general partner, it's going to be your home that they're going to look for to satisfy when there's someone killed on a well location and there's an explosion of a tank that your company welded and it exploded. And they found out that it wasn't built to API standards or specifications. You need to look for your idea. Is there industry standards there? Are there are there qualifications that are required to be able to become a member of that industry? You know, what is required to become a recognized member of, for our example here that we talked about tonight, the American Petroleum Institute? What's required there to be a member? And so look for that, just circle that box, industry standards. Can we meet them? What are they? Can we meet them? That sort of thing that we want to consider. Another aspect of business is authorization. Some businesses are regulated. Over time, the number of businesses that are out there, the number of regulations have been decreasing, but there are some businesses that are regulated. Is my idea subject to regulation? Do I have to have a certificate of necessity that's issued by the Public Utility Commission, or a permit? In Three Stooges Trucking, do I have, am I permitted? Do I have my permits to operate under the Department of Transportation? So you just have to ask yourself, in addition to these kind of bullet points or circles that you're writing down and considerations that you want to think of, is a permit required? Is a license required to do what I'm going to do? Do I need a certificate of necessity? You know, that sort of thing. And so that's a question that you need to ask. Local businesses may need to be licensed by in the city of Farmington. You got to go get your local business license as well. So just ask that question, circle that: permits, licenses, certificates of necessity. Do I have them? Are they required for my business? One of the things that you will want to consider very early on in your business is particularly if is you don't want things that would happen with a business to in terms of claims that are made that would force the closure or wind up or sale of the business if a lawsuit is filed. So one of the things that you want to consider in your business plan and look into is go meet with your insurance broker and figure out what my insurance needs are going to be. You know, is it do I do something where there is a possibility of injuring people? Is there the possibility of property damage? How am I going to protect my assets that I I gather together, so that, for example, if I was the Osprey Pack Company over in Mancos or Cortez, and a fire destroyed my plant and my warehouse, it would be devastating to the business. And so you want insurance is one of those things that you obtain to cover a risk of when something that happens of an unplanned nature that threatens the financial stability of the business. And so it can be your equipment that you're protecting. It can be your assets in terms of your property or your cars or your vehicles, that sort of thing. The completed products. What happens if you create a product that goes out? And for last year's technology, I would just point this out. For last year's winners of the Hawk Tank, one of the businesses, or one of the concepts, was a business that developed software to protect athletes from head injuries. What if that malfunctions and doesn't pick up things, and somebody gets injured relying on your software or your idea or your concept, and it doesn't work? You know, that risk aversion that we've been talking about is a real problem, and insurance is one way that you deal with that. And so part of your business plan is absolutely from a legal standpoint is to go in and talk with your broker about the insurance that you need for your completed products, for what you build, for what you make, for your equipment, for your inventory. And unfortunately, in today's operations, you're going to have insurance that protects not only your workers for workers' compensation that you will want, because nobody wants to have an employee who's injured on the job and then you have to pay for that. So you'll have to have workers' compensation injury insurance to protect your workers. But you end up wanting insurance that covers claims for discrimination and harassment and those sorts of things. They happen in the workplace. They can be devastating to a business if you kick that can down the road, and then we're all getting along and we're all collegial and we're all joking, we all take it in until somebody decides that now that's sexual harassment, and they file a claim with the EEOC and end up making a recovery against your business. And so insurance is just, it is an absolute necessity in being able to help your business survive when that claim gets made. And so your insurance broker, you say, I'm never going to use it, I'm wasting money, I'm never going to have a claim made, until you have the claim made, and it ends up ruining the business and forcing you to close. So it's a cost of doing business. It's something that you're going to have to consider. That we've talked a little bit about employees that way. And so let's kind of talk about another aspect of employees, and that is when people work for you and you direct them, they become your employees. And you're all familiar. You watch the news. You watch what's happened in California relative to Uber and Lyft drivers. Are they employees of the company, or are they independent contractors? Now, so you kind of have to decide how we're going to operate our business. What is the nature of the employees that we're going to hire? Do we want to have employees? Are we going to farm work out to others, to independent contractors to do things for us? One of the benefits is as employees, you're liable for workers' comp, you're liable for benefits, you're liable for claims that are made relative to employment, for wrongful termination or discrimination, and usually you try to create a separation and create a shield a little bit from liability by using subcontractors or third-party independent contractors that do things for you. It may save you money and avoid liability. One of the hallmarks then of independent contractors is, do they supply their own equipment to do it? Do you control the details of what they do, or do they get to decide how the job is done? If you control it and you supply the equipment, they'll be determined to be employees and not an independent contractor. So in your model, as you're kind of thinking about how you're going to structure, what are we going to farm out? What are we going to do ourselves? What can we hire others to do as independent contractors till we get the business up and running, and then we might bring them in-house. That's a way that some businesses get started, is we're going to farm things out initially till we grow a little bit, and then we'll bring those operations internal to the business. So the idea of employees versus independent contractors. One of the things then you have to kind of consider is do you want, you're in some sort of employment contract with your employees. Generally speaking, I don't like them because they only create problems both ways. As the employee, you're obligated to stay as long as the term of contract is, and you can't leave. and the employer, if you don't like the employee and they're not performing to your level, but they have a contract and they're performing as per the contract, you may not be able to get rid of them. You know, most states, particularly New Mexico, is an at-will employment state. And so employees then, if you're just not getting along, you don't think they're putting out the right effort, you don't think they're the right fit for your business, the vibe that you get at the business changed when Curly came to work, and Larry and Mo get along, but Curly changed everything. You know, you may want to have the freedom that not having an employment contract gives you. Here's the caveat. Not having an employment contract doesn't allow you to discriminate based on recognized factors, age, sex, gender, gender identity, nationality, race. Those protected classifications apply no matter what in discharging an employee. You can't discharge an employee, even if it's an at-will state, based on one of those protected categories or classifications. And so, but most businesses like to have the freedom that an employment contract takes away from them. So you have to ask yourselves, do we want employment contracts for our employees? Do we want to have the ability to make decisions and use at will, which lets either party, the employer, terminate the relationship for any legitimate cause, or no cause at all, as long as it's not a discriminatory reason or a pretense, pretextual reason. One of the things that comes with contracts is, let's say you have an IT, you are creating something, and your employees are coming in and you have something very valuable that they're doing that you don't want your competition to be able to utilize, or for them to leave your business and take their experience to your competitor. You know, Three Stooges Trucking does really great, and Curly's been a great guy, but Curly's unhappy. He was the guy that kind of put all our logistics systems and all the software that made the company work well. Now he's unhappy and wants to go over to Red Ryder Trucking. How do you prevent that? How do you protect your company? And so you would have non-compete agreements. They don't have to be you don't have to have an employment contract to have a non-compete agreement. And you don't have to have an employment contract to have a non-disclosure agreement, which makes sure that what proprietary and confidential business information that Curly has, he doesn't take it over to Red Ryder Trucking. Non-competition agreements may limit, for a period of time in a geographical area, that employee from being able to work in a competing business. In New Mexico, that is geographically and temporally limited. So I can't prevent you from working, if you're in Farmington, prevent you from working in Las Cruces when my business, when Three Stooges Trucking never does business in Las Cruces. And I can't make it in perpetuity. I can't make that bar last forever. 3 years is kind of the outside. 2 years is very common. 1 year is very short. But if it's longer than 3 years, the courts in New Mexico don't like that. They think that they're unfair. Colorado law is a little bit different relative to non-compete agreements. And so you have to kind of consider what the nuance of Colorado law relative to non-competes is. And it may be limited to corporate officers and not employees. So those are some considerations. How are we going to staff our business? How are we going to keep them loyal? I think it's best to keep them loyal by paying them well, treating them fairly, and valuing them as employees, rather than creating a system where they are essentially, we've created a fiefdom, and you have serfs now that work for you. They will leave. And so the best way to keep employees happy is to pay them fairly, to recognize their value, and to recognize their worth to the business from the outset. So one of the other things that you consider that kind of leads our next topic that I want to cover, and then I'd like to be able to go a little bit longer and then be able to answer some questions for you that you may have based on things that we've covered in our bullet points, our circles of things to consider as you create your business, and topics to at least have come across the plane of consciousness as you kind of putting your business plan together. Is these employees then are creating something for you. You bring them in, and let's go our example last year for those who were in the competition that created the software to help prevent head injuries for athletes. They have created something. They may have created software. They may have even created something other than software. They've created actual items that can be trademarked and copyrighted. Copyrights protect written documentation. Trademarks can certainly protect drawings and other items like that, concepts that are put into writing. So you want to be able to protect both of those things. Here's what you need to be aware of when you start your business. You bring in Curly, and you bring in Curly's cousin into your business for Three Stooges Trucking, and they start creating software, okay? And they create some other things to handle the logistics. They have software and create business items that allow the trucks to be monitored remotely from wherever they're at. You know where the driver is, you know where the truck is, you know how fast they're going, all that sort of stuff. You create you create the ability to create that data, capture that data, and utilize that data in your business. Well, Curly and his cousin decide they now want to go to Red Ryder Trucking, and they want to take all of that with them. Well, if they were paid to do it, if they were paid as part of their duties at the Three Stooges Trucking, if you're paid by your employer to create that information, to create those documents, to create those writings, to create those plans or drawings, under the laws, generally speaking, they belong to the company. Okay, and the copyright and the protection belongs to the ownership of that intellectual property remains with the employer, with the company. Okay, well, in today's world, let me tell you, employees are pretty savvy out there, and they say, hey, I'm coming and I'm bringing all my creativity to Three Stooges Trucking, and I have an opportunity to go to work for Three Stooges, or I have the opportunity to go to work for Red Ryder Trucking. And Red Ryder, their policy is that if they have an agreement, an intellectual property agreement, that if I come up with a concept during my employment, they agree to share in some of the income or the profits generated by my idea. So where do you think employee is going to go? To Red Ryder Trucking, where they might get something for their ideas, or whether they go to Three Stooges, where they're not going to get anything. They're going to work hard, they're going to get their paycheck and do a great job for the employer, but the employer gets the benefit of the intellectual property. And when I leave, I can't use it because it's now protected. It's copyrighted and trademarked, and they own it and protect it. Let me just tell you, in your business, one of the most valuable assets will be the things that you create. Those intellectual property items will be among the most valuable things, and you want to protect them. And so you have to, this fine balance of how you attract employees in to be able to be creative and give a benefit, but that they do it for the benefit of the company, and how to recognize that. we deal with that at San Juan College. We have professors that come up with ideas and concepts, and who it's that's one of the things that you kind of consider in your business standards, your business plan, your operating agreement, your bylaws, your general partnership agreement. You may want to consider how we're going to deal with the issue of intellectual property, and being able to attract people in, knowledgeable people, and that they want to come and gain the benefit of what they know and they bring, but not hamper the company, because when they leave, they take it with them, or they pass it on to your competitor because you didn't properly protect it, or they didn't have a right to deal with it from the outset. So we've talked about a number of things. Let me talk about one other thing relative to employment, and that is am I getting into a business that is commonly focused, or a focus of labor organizations? We don't have a lot of them in New Mexico and in the West generally, but some businesses, because of what they do, may attract skilled people or skilled craftsmen that are union members. And I may be entering a business or into a business area where employees are union members, particularly if I am building things or making things, or I have tradesmen that are involved. That may be another factor that you have to kind of consider in your business plan of how I'm going to address that issue of potential for having my business unionized. Unions can do a great thing. Unions can also take the ability and hamstring management to be able to do what it feels is necessary. And so that's the balance of trying to figure out how you treat your employees, and whether they're paid fairly, treated fairly, recognized for the value that they give, and you provide a great place to work. If you don't, you invite them to be unhappy, and some employees will go that route in terms of trying to equalize the balance of power by a union effort. So that's something to consider. I would state then kind of we've talked about a variety of things, and it may be appropriate to kind of open up some questions, and that may allow us to consider other things and areas that we haven't talked about yet that may be important to you. But I think the thing that I would stress in summation kind of is that risk awareness and risk aversion and risk analysis. Put that pretty high on what you do as you create your business plan. The bottom line is, and you've heard this adage before, is that businesses that fail to plan end up planning to fail. And the more that you think about issues and address them ahead of time, the less likely it is that those problems will end up becoming stumbling blocks to your successful entrepreneurial effort. And so you have to go into it with a bit of caution, maybe a bit of trepidation, certainly looking at, nobody wants to be the person that's creating the business that says, oh, Curly, he's always a glass half empty kind of guy. He's always a downer. And whereas Mo and Larry, hey, they're always upbeat. Every business needs that reality check, and to be thinking about the negatives from the outset rather than kicking them down the road. When the negatives can't be dealt with effectively, you have a fight and the business fails because you can't agree on what should be done. let me just check one other thing here relative to topics. If I could, some other notes that I have. Um, you will find potential online, and I warn you relative to like everything else on the internet, you get what you pay for, and if you got it for free, there's a reason it may be for free. But there may be suggested things out there that you can look at relative to operating agreements, to bylaws, in regards to partnership agreements. There may be things out there that you can look at, but I would give you a caution that as you go on and do this in real life rather than as a competition for your business plan, is there is, as you have found out in taking stuff off the internet, sometimes it is not appropriate for what you need and ends up hurting you rather than helping you. I would encourage you, again, to take some time, whether you go on the Colorado Secretary of State's website or the New Mexico Secretary of State's website, and just look a little bit about the how you can create that stuff for at least getting your business started. That won't answer those critical questions of the operating agreement, the bylaws, or the partnership agreement. But it may be a place for you to kind of learn and explore as you consider your business plan. And why I'm doing this is I'm doing this to learn. And so if you spend some time figuring out how businesses get created and what I need to do, that may help answer questions that I may have to answer as I go through this process of my business plan. I have my business plan checklist here. Let me see if there's any other legal items here that we want to talk about that we haven't covered. Remember, you are now going into, and this is probably pretty important. The purpose of the business plan, I think, is that you want to get somebody that's going to fund you. You want somebody that's going to invest money. You want to have, people whose wallet is thicker than yours to come in and help you out by giving you money and investing. They invest money in exchange for a membership stake in your business, in exchange for becoming a partner in your business, in exchange for becoming a shareholder, and can be. This is the situation where the tail gets to wag the dog a little bit. Your financer, your lender who is going to put money into your business, has a huge stake in how your business is operated. Not only in helping you through your business plan and suggesting things and making the business more likely to be successful, but when it's not successful, they're going to be coming and looking at you. I can tell you that for startups, they, in most instances, will want personal guarantees, where they want you to have skin in the game. They want to have your money on the line too, just not their money. And so you may have loan agreements. You may have promissory notes. You may have personal guarantees that you're going to sign relative to accessing funding for your business. I would encourage you, if you go that route. I've already made a pitch for seeing your lawyer about the business creation and seeing your CPA about the tax considerations for your business. You may want to make a return visit back to your lawyer to talk about the loan documents, okay? So that you understand what's going to happen and what they're going to take as a guarantee. How is that going to be secured? Or people only loan money if they have a stake in the interest, an ownership stake in the business, shares of stock, a membership interest, or they take a security interest in your equipment or your inventory. They take a mortgage on your building. They want some way of being able to claw back money if the business fails, that they don't get left holding the bag and get nothing. And let me tell you, banks aren't in the business of taking nothing. They are very adept at protecting themselves. So my advice is always go back to your lawyer and have someone else help you work through and look at those documents and advise you what happens with those financing documents and what it means to your business. You know, I think beyond the things that I've talked about, these things that are in a marketing plan and checklist are things beyond legal. You know, marketing and sales and what industry trends are and whatnot. You know, where things are headed. You'll have to kind of consider all that. But I've tried to give you some ideas and things to consider from the legal standpoint that are questions that have to be asked. And if you don't ask it now, you may find that to be a stumbling block down the road. At that point in time, let's go ahead. It's 6:15. We've been going for an hour and 15 minutes. If you don't mind, let's take a short break, a couple of minutes to stand up, stretch, get a drink, and then let's open it up to questions. And you can unmute yourself if you want, and we can maybe have a little bit more discussion. Let's see if we can avoid, however, feedback and that sort of thing. So take a couple of minutes and just stretch and get a drink. I'm going to do that for a minute, and then let's get back and answer questions that you may have.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Bingham.
Everybody ready to get back to it?
Yes, and if I could take a minute, everybody, I just want to follow up on something Mr. Bingham said. And before we got started, there were a few people on, and Taylor, I was talking to Taylor, and having been a faculty member for over 20 years and administrator for about 10 or 11, one of the questions I always ask my students in the first day of classes were, so why are you taking this class? What is your program or degree pathway you're on? So where are you going to get your associates? Where are you going to get your bachelor's? Where are you going to get your master's? Where are you going to get your PhD? And in a lot of cases, most students, which is absolutely fine and normal, weren't even quite sure where they were going to get their associates and what field of study and or their bachelor's degree. But if you start planning now, and you can change your mind, but if you start thinking about that progression, that career ladder, if you will, you're going to end up finding that you'll be on that path faster than you think. You might end up getting scholarships, mentor support. All kinds of things might be available to you. And it's very important from an educational standpoint. But as we're talking about planning your business, it's from that standpoint too. And then one other thing I want to bring up, and that Mr. Bingham was talking about with regards to intellectual rights and things like that. I'm reminded of the famous story about Nikolai Tesla and George Westinghouse. If you know Tesla, he was the one that created the alternating current. And I remember a few years ago when I was in Washington, D.C., went to the Smithsonian, and here was this little bitty device that was his first device that created the alternating current that we use for everything. And it was this little, it was just tiny. It wasn't larger than 6 or 7 inches. Well, as Westinghouse and Edison, and Tesla had worked for Edison as well, were fighting. Edison was beginning to basically, he started a very nasty media campaign against Tesla and Westinghouse. And there were some issues, and Westinghouse began to lose investors. And so one of the things his investors were telling him, well, if you will get Tesla to sign over the copyrights to you, Mr. Westinghouse, we will invest in your company. Well, Tesla, out of good faith, for a temporary purpose of allowing Westinghouse to get the company going and Tesla himself to continue to work on his ideas, signed over those rights. Well, it ended up being a disaster. Westinghouse made a lot of money and Tesla never got the patents back, or at least partial of them. So he never profited or got any of the profits that came from that original partnership based on his ideas, his designs, his patents, and his engineering. So everything that Mr. Bingham has been talking to you about is applicable to any field, any business that you might be starting of, from something like an electric company to selling widgets to even in the creative areas, making films, making art, writing books, scripts. I was fortunate enough to attend a class last week in our digital and film class, and we had an attorney and a couple of folks in the film industry here in New Mexico, and they were talking about when you go make a pitch with a company, you need to have certain documents lined up, because sometimes that company, that film company or that music company, they may want to sign a contract with you. And it's invariable. Many, many stories of musicians, particularly, that have gone in and gotten record deals, but they didn't sign the contracts appropriately or had it in the contracts where they got royalties. So they ended up, the record company made a bunch of money off of it, but the artist never did. So just some things to think about. So as we go into this Q&A session, again, thank you all for being here. Those of you joining late, we appreciate you being here. Unmic your microphone, raise your hand, and let us know your name and what college you're attending, and then you and Mr. Bingham can have a conversation. So thank you.
Let me make one other observation, and
Sure.
that is another bullet point based on that you at least ask is, am I going to use intellectual property that is owned by someone else in my business? Because if yes, if you find out that your concept is actually a concept that is already protected, that means that you may have an uphill battle relative to what you want to do. It doesn't mean that it's not possible. Let me tell you, intellectual property is licensed all the time. And you pay a royalty, you pay something to use it. And that's some of the value that the holders of that intellectual property have as to why it's worth something, is they can make money off of it. They may not be using it themselves, but they can make money off of it. Today, there's many companies, historic company names that you see applied to all sorts of products that had nothing to do with that company. But the name of the company has value, a marketing value. And so they get a royalty. When these businesses go bankrupt, somebody wants to buy the name, and they buy the name, and they might buy the intellectual property. So if your concept that your business plan works with is protected intellectual property, don't give up, but you just have to go look at, is it protected? Is it totally new, or is it protected because somebody else came up with it? And if so, can I go ahead and get a license to use that property by paying a royalty to its owner or user? Okay, let's go on to questions.
Mr. Bingham, my name is Taylor Altman. I am a student in Fort Lewis. Really appreciate all the information you gave to us here. Quite a bit to digest.
It is a bunch.
That's just trying to, I'll have to go back and watch the video for sure and make sure I really get it. But so my idea does pertain to intellectual property and an idea I came up with myself. And I am curious just a little bit about the process of finding the right patent lawyer to apply. I've done a fair amount of research on my own through Google Patents to find other ideas that are related to it. But basically, it's a variation of a fanny pack, and the patent for the fanny pack is far expired. So could you just shed some light on how I might plan forward to keep this moving?
Yeah, and that's a good question, Taylor. I appreciate that. Let me tell you that the lawyers that do intellectual property work it's a very narrow field of law and very specialized. And the lawyers tend to focus. Some focus on trademarks and some focus on copyrights. And so oftentimes you'll find that those people that get involved, lawyers in that area, may have had engineering backgrounds, and they're people that create things and whatnot. And so they've melded their interests together. And so it's very specialized. And I can tell you, in New Mexico, there aren't very many of them. And so there's just a handful of them. And so the general practitioner in Durango that hangs their shield out is probably not the lawyer that you want to help you, because it's so specialized. And so, you'll have to ask for that referral. You may need to call up the Colorado Bar Association or the New Mexico Bar Association and say, do you have patent lawyers that you can make a referral to me? Or you may ask that local lawyer who you've gone to help you with your incorporation. Hey, who can help me with this? Who does this work, and get a referral to get in. And that is, I think, if you're coming up with a concept, that along with the CPA and visiting with the lawyer about the how your company needs to be created and what you need to do to protect yourself is probably a third leg on that stool in regards to making sure that I've got this covered, because you don't want to spend a whole bunch of money and get the company up and running and then get the letter from the holder of the patent that says, we see that you're doing this and we recognize the design and we feel it infringes on our patent. And you get the cease and desist letter, and then your investor gets cold feet. It is one of those risk aversion things that you consider at the front, rather than, oh, well, we'll worry about it when somebody sends us that letter.
Yes, sir. Makes sense to do the due diligence up front and not get whacked later.
Yeah.
Just to follow up, now, because there are so few of these niche professionals out there, I would assume that they got to cost a pretty penny.
Yes and no.
Okay.
Yeah, let me just tell you that there are lawyers. The person that I referred to in New Mexico used to work for a large law firm in Albuquerque, and then left and started his own sole practice limited to trademark and copyright work. He lives in the East Mountains, which is on the other side of the Sandia Mountains. And he's a wonderful guy and very reasonable. He doesn't charge a New York price for his work. And so those people are out there, and you just have to find them. Just be prepared that if you go to Chicago, you go to Denver, you go to Dallas or Houston or Washington, D.C., that you will be paying that arm and a leg price.
Right on. Thank you.
Yeah.
And for Dr. Rollinson, would you give me a little guidance here for this business plan competition? I mean, it's great. This is going to take a little bit of digging into finding the right resources. But just for the sake of time, because this will be due the end of March, could you help give me a ballpark of what I should be estimating as far as our financials here? And then which will, of course, be tweaked later on down the road.
Well, I can again just give you an estimate. And again, I'll refer you to the upcoming sessions that are coming up, your market analysis and revenue forecast, which I would encourage you to participate in that session, which is next week, about cost. But you usually want to look at your materials, your overhead, meaning, are you renting a building? Are you doing this in your garage? Are you having to buy tools? Those kinds of things to at least give you a cost estimate. And then, one of the things, so I have a fine arts background.
I'm sorry if I can interrupt you just real
Sure.
quick there. I totally understand the cost of goods and cost of manufacturing. Really, this is specifically asking to the legal portion of our business.
Oh, well, again,
let me help on.
I sort of say I would defer to Mr. Bingham on that.
Let me tell you that I would, I think for just the consultation, the creation of the business, the creation of the bylaws, the operating agreement, and the partnership agreement, just to get the business created and functional, I would estimate that somewhere between, and again, LLCs will be a little easier than the corporations, but I think that for your purposes, for an LLC, you might plan for between 2,000 and 2,500 for consultations and creation, and for a corporation, you might expend somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000. The more complex, the more it costs. But I think that would not be an unreasonable number to stick in for your business plan for legal fees related to creation of the business entity. Stick something in for to spend a couple of hours with the CPA and back and forth. And so I would think that it would be safe between $500 and $1,000 for your CPA to give you some advice and some direction.
Wonderful. That was exactly what I needed. Thank you so much.
Hey there, my name's Cy Eckhart.
Cy.
I just got a question about, oh, whoops, my camera is not on. I've got a question, and maybe this would be for a CPA. I've also got my partner here with me. This might be a question for a CPA, but let's say you're established, you have, the LLC, you've got it up and running, you're functioning, you got customers, clients, but you're not making enough to pay the partners of the LLC a salary or an hourly wage. How would you legally pay yourself? Because I know you can't just transfer money out of the business's bank account and into your account. Could you tell me a little bit about that process?
Well, that could be done by oftentimes one of the things that startups do is that you have people that agree to come in and they have no money, but they have experience and they have knowledge, and the company, particularly in the case of LLCs, will value that contribution of what they're going to give relative to service to the company. And it may, that their stake may be outlined that they're going to give a certain number of hours over a certain number of period as their contribution with their knowledge, their experience, in order to get the business up and running. So that's one way of being able to do it. Oftentimes, for the startup, the business owner is the last person that gets paid. And the only thing they're going to get paid out of is if there is a net revenue, if there's a net profit in the operating period. They're the last to get paid. And sometimes, the business may say that we'll do it on the basis of a promissory note. We agree to pay you. We defer the payment of salary now, and we sign the note. There's a number of ways, but I think going in, the expectation is that for new businesses, the members may be the last to get paid and may not get paid until there's a net profit. In the
What
business.
if there are no employees, but just the members? So like just us two are the only people working for the company, owners, the only people working for it. How?
Then what you get out of that would be, you may not pay yourself a salary. What you may take then is, at the end of the day, out of that net profit, is you're going to split that up and say, for you and your partner, you're going to get half of it. I'm going to get the other half of it if there is a profit. That's why you work. And so we'll take it as a profit rather than as a salary or an hourly wage.
Gotcha. And so I guess what I'm asking is how to make that legal. Because I mean, do we have to write ourselves a check from the company and note on there that it's payment, or?
Yes, as in terms of a distribution of profit, yes, you're going to write yourself a check, because your accountant will have a cow, and you want to be able to track, and you want to be able to show where the money went. And so, yes, your accountant will say, yes, you're going to, and oftentimes it will be considered net profits. It's very common for LLCs, because they may be taxed on the basis of individual as an S corp. It's very common for LLCs to say, we're actually going to make distributions quarterly, because the taxes that I have to pay to the federal government may be estimates that are going to be paid quarterly. The federal government doesn't like to get a check at the end of the year. They want to see you make a quarterly payment along the way. And so LLCs will make, and sometimes are required by the operating agreement, to make distributions quarterly so that the individual members can pay their tax obligation.
Gotcha. Cool. Thank you.
Okay.
Cy, what school are you attending, sir?
Oh, I'm at Fort Lewis.
Great. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for doing this.
So I have a question. My name is Zeb. I'm a Fort Lewis student and I run my own car shop. But with an operating agreement, so how often throughout like the business's life should you update that, or is it just kind of whenever you need to?
That's a great question. Because what happens, Zeb, is lots of businesses get started, and the business grows and develops, and things have happened, and that operating agreement that was so important and you spent so much money working on got shoved in a file and nobody looked at it. And then 5 years or 10 years down the road, you've decided that, man, we're not doing anything the way that we had agreed to do in the operating agreement. And so here's the way that gets dealt with, is in an operating agreement, oftentimes you will have an obligation that there will be an annual meeting of the members, okay? And you will specify a date certain, the third Tuesday in February. Lots of businesses, because most businesses, smaller businesses, operate on a tax year that's the same as the IRS year. So from January 1st to December 31st, lots of businesses want to do their annual meeting in late January or February, where they get an opportunity to look back, get all their taxes figured out for the prior year, then meet and decide how things are going, where do we need to make changes. And that annual meeting, Zeb, is a way that you can kind of force yourself to look at that, pull out your operating agreement, pull out your bylaws and say, is this meeting our needs? I represent clients that they don't have to meet. They, on paper, they consent to an annual meeting. They adopt a resolution that approves everything they did in the past year, but they never got together to talk about it. Okay. And what happens is problems get ignored in a business if you never get together and talk about it. So yeah, for your purposes, I would just say in your operating agreement, as you draft that, one of the things you say is that one of the purposes of our annual meeting is to review the operating agreement or the bylaws, and you state it in the bylaws, in order to determine whether or not amendments are necessary.
Okay, that sounds correct. Thank you so much. And then one other question.
Sure.
So when you're manufacturing products in like the aftermarket automotive industry, and there's tons of little small shops doing the same thing, how important do you think it would be to patent like everything, or would you just patent the things that are like really new and innovative?
You've hit the nail on the head. If it is something that's totally different, totally unique, protect yourself. If it is common and it is in the marketplace and it is the oftentimes those items, patents have expired, and it is in the public domain. That is the term. It is in the public domain. Don't spend your effort and money on stuff that's in the public domain. Worry about the stuff that's new and creative and that nobody else, you've never seen it before. And it's kind of funny. I had a client that came to us. I don't want to be a storyteller, but this is how ideas happen. In the trucking business, they have to quickly chain things, and they wanted a little rubber stop that would keep the chains hooked together. Okay, and it was a novel, creative, new idea, and in fact, nobody had ever done it. And so here's, those things happen, and they went ahead and protected the idea, and and so those things are out there. They really are. There's always a the adage is somebody will always want to build a better mousetrap, and they figure out a way to do it. And so, yeah, protect that idea for sure, but don't spend your time worrying on stuff that's in the public domain.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hey, Garrett Gordy here, and I have my partner as well with me.
Hey, Garrett.
Our question today is, are we going to need to increase our prices in total to accommodate for our insurance fees? Because we're going to need our staff and our participants to consistently and always sign waivers.
And we're going to have a lot of liability involved in our business because it's going to be involving motorcycles.
Yeah, that's a great question. Is if you're in that business where there is potential risk, that is a factor that you have to include from the outset, is that we recognize that there will be potential liability, and so we have an insurance factor in that is built into this. We're going to carry, and one of the things that businesses do, let me tell you, you think that $1 million is a lot of money, and that you $1 million of insurance would cover anything that we need. Let me tell you, $1 million in the business sense, in the personal injury world, is nothing. Particularly if you're in the motorcycle field, catastrophic motorcycle injuries, are multi-million-dollar verdicts and claims because of the catastrophic nature of the injuries. And so you not only will want to have a policy that may be a $10 million policy, you want to have excess policy to when, because what happens is policies have a cap and an amount in a certain period of time in a dollar amount in a given year. And it's easy to have 2 or 3 claims eat up all of your insurance coverage, and then you're on to if the company, if it is, you know, they look at the assets of the company after that. They don't look at if you have an LLC or a corporation, they don't get to look at the shareholder or the members' assets, but they'll look at all the corporation assets and property and your shop and your tools and whatnot. And so, yeah, you're going to have to include and it will impact the cost of your product. You can't it can't but help impact the cost of the product. And the question is trying to find a balance there that still allows you to make enough money to go forward and not send all your monies to the insurance broker and the insurance company.
Yeah, finding that balance is going to be a journey for sure.
Where are you two students attending school?
We're at Fort Lewis.
Great. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Zach. I'm actually a Fort Lewis alumni. So
Hey, Zach.
my question kind of concerns when to either incorporate or to file for a tax certificate. So at my stage, I'm kind of looking to get a minimum viable product. And so I have been operating a little bit, and it's out of my garage. And I'm kind of curious your opinion on when you should get that tax certificate or figure out your legal structure if down the line I decide to open up a warehouse to start producing my products instead of just the garage.
Well, that's a good question. I have clients that have dummy companies on the sidelines all the time. And they are organized, and it may be built around a certain aspect of the business. When you incorporate and when you file your articles of organization, you will make a statement as to the kind of the nature of the business. And then you will make this, then you often see this other phrase added to it at the end, and any other lawful pursuit, under the law, which opens up the door to basically anything else that you want to do. And so if you can certainly, there is no downside from organizing an LLC, protecting the name, getting your certificate, and then going forward and adding to it. My only caution would be is before you start really getting into it, you want the other to consider all the other things that we've talked about, that operating agreement, that the bylaws. But you can create a company and under the laws of the state and not have operating agreements or bylaws, and you have a placeholder that's there, and you may have a tax ID number that's established with that. But if you're not making any money, if there's nothing to report, you should your CPA will tell you that there's not going to be a tax due. This is the one side. This is one downside of the corporation. The corporation has an annual report that's due that you have, or a semi-annual report that's due, that the company may be sitting on the shelf and doing nothing. But if you don't file the reports, your company could be held to be not in good standing. And not in good standing may impact your ability to operate. So I'd get the LLC. If you want a placeholder, get yourself an LLC and use that as your placeholder while you kind of consider things. And then when you're ready, pull it off the shelf and you can use it.
Got it. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I just had a client that is a large New Mexico trucking company that had a sister company that owned the company airplane that they used to travel to different locations in the state of New Mexico. And you all are familiar with the current state of the oil and gas industry because you live here, that it's not particularly good. They decided to sell the airplane, but they kept the company and they kept the proceeds from the sale of the airplane in the airplane company. And it's now operating with that capital being invested in another way and being utilized, even though it has nothing to do with the XYZ Air LLC company.
So I have one more question. So if you're planning to open up a business, no matter what, in the next 10, 12 months, I filled out the reservation of name for Colorado. Would you recommend just getting your LLC no matter what if you're planning on operating in the immediate future?
You know, the name is protected. If you've reserved it for as long as the name is reserved, it is protected. You don't, you may not have to actually create the business entity as long as you reserve the name for the allotted time. When the alternative to that is the name is automatically protected if you file for the LLC. And so in New Mexico, you have the option of doing, in fact, on the website that we looked at earlier, it told you you don't have to register the name if you create the business, if you create the LLC or the corporation. So for you, if you've protected the name, that may be all that you need to do right now. But you can certainly go ahead. Just remember that when you file to create an LLC or corporation, you're going to have to pay a filing fee to create the business. The Secretary of State will require a filing fee to do that. And for corporations, the filing fee is dependent on the number of shares of stock. The more shares of stock, the higher the filing fee.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Bingham, do you have to have a federal tax ID or a state ID tax number when you're filing and starting your corporation or your LLC when you start the process, or is that an after fact? How does that work in?
I tell clients is before they do anything, we've created the business. Now I ask them, do you have your tax ID number? And it's easy. They're very easy to get. It's not a big deal to get your tax ID number. But before you actually start doing anything, absolutely have your tax ID number. And you can do it either that way, or you can get it at the outset while you're getting other things together. And then it's already in place when you're ready to hit the ground running. But I would not conduct actual operations until you have your tax ID number. And your lender may require that. That may be an element on the checklist to get your loan, is they'll want to have you give your federal tax ID. Employer number is often what it's also referred to as an employer number, but it's your federal tax ID number. So if you know they're going to require it anyway, you know, maybe one of those things you just go ahead and get.
Thank you.
Thank you for all of your advice and information tonight. I really appreciate it.
Just remember, it's worth what it costs tonight. And let me just make this is the lawyer coming out. We've talked about things generally. We have not talked about anybody's specific business. We've not talked about your particular idea. And so anything that I've said tonight has been as a general nature and a general concept. And not, this is the same sort of disclaimer that lawyers make all the time. It's not meant for a particular purpose, not meant to give you legal advice. And my advice for you individually is to go out and seek competent legal counsel. If you're actually going to start your business, go seek competent legal counsel. They can be a great friend and a benefactor. You know, the days are over. Let me tell you, it used to be that lawyers would say, you'd go in and say, hey, I'm going to start this business, and you had no money. And the lawyer said, well, I'll do the work and you give me some stock in your business in exchange for doing all the legal work. Those days are done. That doesn't happen anymore because it creates a conflict of interest for the lawyer. But that was very common at one point in time where lawyers would take a stake in a business. And in fact, I don't want to tell, but this is a war story. When Bill Gates was in Albuquerque, he had the opportunity and went to one of the lawyers in Albuquerque to see if they would, in exchange for being given a stake in Microsoft, would do the legal work for Microsoft. And the lawyer said no. Well, we all know what happened with Bill Gates. And so, they were operating in the garage at that point in time in Albuquerque. And who would have thought, that Bill Gates, one of the 3 or 4 most wealthy people in the world from Microsoft, that lawyer said, sure, I'll take a 20% stake in the company. So, any other questions?
Yeah, this is Sayakart again. I had a question about tax stuff. So we already have a tax ID and an EIN, so we have to fill out a form 1065 for the LLC, I guess. Do you know if there's something on that tax form where we elect to be taxed individually or taxed as a corporation, or do we have to file another form?
I know that from the legal side, we make we make an election. Oftentimes it's referred to as an election. And the lawyers don't do the election. The client does the election. And I believe it is on an IRS form. But that's why I always send people to the CPA, because they do that stuff every day. The lawyers, unless you're a tax lawyer, you do not do it every day. And it is one of those esoteric, very narrow areas of the law. And frankly, I don't want to screw up. And so I would much rather send you to the CPA to have it done right and get the help that you need.
Awesome. Thank you.
So we've got time for about 1, maybe 2 questions. So if you haven't asked one, go ahead and ask. I'm sure probably there's 2 or 3 other people in the group that are wondering the same thing. So please ask your question. Don't hesitate.
The only bad question is one that never got asked.
Exactly. Well, with that, I will remind everybody again that next week, workshop 4 will be about market analysis and revenue forecasting. So that'll be critical as you go forward. And then on the 22nd, you don't have to have your proposal together, but you need to go ahead and register your teams. That'll be the due date. And then we've got more after that. And again, there'll be folks working with all of you to help you get your proposals ready. So keep those dates in mind. Mr. Bingham, I can't thank you enough, sir, for agreeing to do this. Wow, great information tonight. I always love these kinds of activities because I always learn something as well. And the law changes on a regular basis, either locally at state or federal. So it's always good to have someone with your expertise, sir, to at least give us some general guidelines and recommendations for these incredible creative students. So thank you so much. So before we adjourn, one more time, anybody have any questions for Mr. Bingham?
Hey, everybody, thanks for letting me help tonight. Appreciate the opportunity to help, and I wish you the best of luck. I look forward to seeing the video on the award winners, because they're creative, the creative ideas. And that's the great thing about what you're doing is you know what, literally the sky's the limit in terms of coming up with something new and creative. And if you're motivated, there's always a place for an entrepreneur, and for creative people can be successful. And I would just tell you that sometimes it isn't on your first business or your second business or your third business. Sometimes it's your 4th or 5th business where you finally hit a lick, and then somebody comes to you and says, hey, we want to buy your business. And you can be that guy that or that gal then that at age 35 or 38 gets to retire because you sold it. You sold your business for millions of dollars, and you know, it happens. And you can be that, entrepreneur that that wants to do that and gets to do that, and then take your money and create something new and something different.
I'll be sure and get that Zoom link to you, Mr. Bingham, for the awards ceremony, sir.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody. Have a good, safe weekend.
Everybody take care. Thank you again.
Okay. Good night.
All right.